Hello, it's Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. on the West Side, which we sometimes call Pacific. Yes, my time zone naming protest continues.
I'm
Um,
proud of my ocean.
okay, well, then we'll call it that's 8 p.m. on the Atlantic and 5 p.m. on the Pacific. I'm not even anywhere near the Atlantic, but we'll go ahead and say it anyways. All right, welcome to Bill and Sean's Exotic Pet Adventures, show number 2.
You're on
We changed the
Lake
name up
Michigan time.
recently. But a special welcome to our Jackson Chameleon community, our chameleon enthusiasts, and our exotic pet keepers. As always, at the controls is the headmaster of the Chameleon Academy, Bill Strand, and I'm your host, Sean McZoo. Announcements for this week. Obviously, we've broadened our horizons. We've gone beyond what we did in our first 4 or 5 shows. We were talking about mostly about chameleons, and then we added some snakes here and there so I could have people tell me what kind of snake to get, which I haven't gotten yet, so I still have to do
You
that.
haven't gotten your snake yet?
I was told I was going to get a free one. It didn't pan out, and so I've kind of decided maybe I need to go in a different direction. So I don't
Sean,
know.
how
We'll
is it
see.
that I got my snake before you got yours?
Because yours is mean and nasty and it bites people, and someone wanted to get rid of it, where mine is lovely, awesome, and incredible, and someone else wanted it more than me. So
Wow.
that's just the way. I mean, I'm not gonna. I know it's your lovely green cuddle bunny, but still.
Mine loves me.
I see both your hands though, and you seem to have all your fingers. So I guess that's a good sign so far. All right, so we've gone a little different direction. We got a website coming at some point. We have a Facebook page. We also have the Chameleon Enthusiast, the Reptile Enthusiast, and the all-new Exotic Pet Adventures. Instagram, we've got Chameleon Academy as always, the Reptile Entrepreneur, and McZoo Exotic Pets, which I've changed it from exotics to exotic pets. Saturday, Bill, homework and live chat. I see we've been talking about veiled chameleons this week. What's
We've
up
been
with that?
talking about veiled chameleons on the Chameleon Academy, and late tonight, you're going to have a podcast with all of the information. See, with the Chameleon Academy, every year or two, I upgrade the care summaries, and this has been a major upgrade. I have doubled the size of it, and so we're going to I'm going to introduce that and then go through it. Although actually I'm going to only go through the first half of it because the other half is there's enough material there for a complete new episode. So I'm going to have to do this one in chunks. But this week is about the veiled chameleon. You'll have a podcast coming out tomorrow, and then a live chat on Saturday morning.
So veiled
YouTube.
chameleons, those are the chameleons that are kind of like, I don't know, foolproof, aren't they? Or compared to all the rest of them, those seem to thrive no matter what you do.
You know, I love comparing and
Although,
contrasting veiled chameleons and Jackson's chameleons because veiled chameleons actually come from a higher altitude than Jackson's chameleons. And so you would think that they would need the nighttime drop and everything that Jackson's chameleons need even more. But instead of needing it, they survive without it and they just get unhealthy. And so where a Jackson's chameleon will just die, oh, okay, we're doing it wrong. Veiled chameleons will supercharge, they'll get bigger, they'll have more eggs, and everything that we humans say, oh my goodness, that's success. And so we do more of it. And so they've really run us through the ringer here in the chameleon community, and we're trying to pull ourselves out of that and do better, but it'll take a little while. Anyway, that's what we're talking about.
I heard a rumor. The veiled chameleon doesn't come from the desert. They're not out there in the sand making dunes, hiding in the sandy areas. Or what's up with that?
That's a very powerful rumor. Yes, the problem is that we get a lot of pictures of the veiled chameleon when the dry season hit and all the foliage is gone, so they're easy to spot and easy to photograph. And so we've thought that they've come from hot, arid places, but all it takes is talking to the people who have actually been there, and they will tell you, no, it gets nice and lots of foliage and thick foliage. And so they live in this little oasis in the mountain valleys. And so we've been under the wrong impression for so long. And like I said, it's going to take a while for that ship to turn. But if we change our husbandry, they are going to be living much longer. Much
Okay.
longer. 7-10 years
Awesome.
should be easy.
I've had one. I called him Deadpool. I don't know why I decided to do that, other than it was one of the first chameleons back after I came back after being away from chameleon for a brief period of time, and so I thought I'd name him Deadpool just in case I didn't do well. He did well, so I guess that's good. But anyways, we've talked about it. You've got the homework. We've got to get the stuff done for tomorrow, and then Saturday morning we've got a show to talk about the veiled chameleons. But today we're not talking about veils. We're talking about one of the most awesome chameleons, and I think Bill's favorite chameleon, despite his love of veiled, is the Jackson chameleon. And I think maybe the Jackson's Antholophus is his favorite chameleon, but I'll let him tell us. What do you think? What is your favorite chameleon of the group of the
Yeah,
Jacksons?
it's going to be the Xantholophus, the
Okay.
yellow crested, but the
Mhm.
one that's the most common. People know about it and see it,
Mhm.
and that's the iconic Jackson's chameleon. That's got to be my favorite. I mean, it's got the
Okay.
horns, it's got a great color, it's got a even disposition, live bearing. I
Mhm.
mean, my goodness,
All
it's
right.
a
So
great
it's
example.
an awesome chameleon. I have several of mine. In fact, I have several from you, and I have several from other locations. In fact, some from Kenya. Most of them come from Kenya and the area around there. There's some living in Hawaii. Tell me the story about how the heck did they get to Hawaii? Did they get on a boat? Did they, get stuck on a plane? What happened?
They got on an airplane and they flew to a guy's pet store that he wanted to sell Jackson's chameleon, so he imported them and got about 3 dozen, I believe. It's hard to tell exactly the numbers, but one source says about 3 dozen, and they were a little bit worse for the wear because of the trip, and so he put them out into the his backyard to recover, because we know it's what the wonderful thing that natural sunlight does for chameleons. So he put
And
them all back
chameleons are like
out there.
tortoises. They just stay put. They don't
Yeah.
move, and they're very slow. So minutes later, they were gone, huh?
Yeah, well, as we all know, that chameleons move very slow when they know you're looking at them. Just take your eyes off of them, and you'd be surprised at how suddenly quick they can move. Now, they're not like an alligator lizard or a frilled dragon, but they can move, and you get distracted, and they're gone. And this guy, I think it's a guy. I think the name was Robin. So I don't know if it was a man or a woman, went out to go collect them, and they weren't there. So the entire, as far as we know, the entire population of the Hawaiian Islands is populated from those 36 individuals, of which we don't know what the sex ratio was, how many of them actually survived, and so it's at most 36 individuals, as far as we know. And then they just spread. They spread, and we got in the United States. They became ubiquitous, so common, and it's a strange thing because Jackson's chameleons aren't really the best pet chameleon. They have they're exacting standards. They need nighttime drops to be healthy. So it's not the best pet chameleon. They just became very popular because so many of them came in from Hawaii. Europe did not have this problem, or I don't know, I'll call it a problem. So Europe didn't have this sudden influx of Jackson's chameleons because they're not getting them from Hawaii. As far as I know, you know what? I'm going to have to check with Jurgen about that and make sure that I don't know that any of them got, but I'll check. Make sure my facts are straight here. But
But they didn't
anyway,
get dropped off in Europe and live there because they can't live in Europe. I guess there'd be some areas in Europe they may be able to tolerate as they get towards the uh, the veiled
well,
chameleons area, which isn't Europe, which is actually Asia, but nonetheless.
I'm wondering if if people started exporting from Hawaii to Europe, it became illegal very quickly because Hawaii did not want people releasing animals on the island to be able to be caught later, essentially art ranching, which is done in the United States. So there are areas in the United States where they've let Jackson's chameleons go and they're ranching them. So a lot of what we get now actually comes from the continental United States. And these are closely guarded secrets as to where they are, because I don't think it's legal. But they at least don't want people coming in and taking their Jackson's chameleons that they are ranching. So I don't have any inside knowledge other than to know just shadowy facts that they exist. But it looks like Jackson's chameleons, at least the Hawaiian stock, are going to be around for a while.
But the Kenyans are so much better. They've got such a broader diversity of genetics. They seem to be much larger. They seem to grow better. They seem to have healthier babies. I actually haven't worked much with the Hawaiians recently. I've just done Kenyans of late.
Yeah, well,
Thoughts?
the Hawaiians have been separated for a while, and they've percolated on the island for a while, and so they have a little bit of a different genetics. Um, it's not so diverse that it's obvious the difference between the Hawaiian population and the Kenyan population, but when you look at the Kenyans, just overall they seem bigger. The horns seem straighter, larger, and so you can just feel that there is a difference. And of course, whenever I say that, somebody posts a picture of a Kenyan of a big male in Hawaii that has straight horns. Yes, it's not saying all of them are like that. It's just more of them there. They're developing on a track of their own. And I just remember in the 90s when I wanted Jackson's chameleons, I always had to ask, I want one with straight horns, because they'd always come in with these horns all the way, all over the place. And it would just been an issue. Now, honestly, I don't know the origin of the ones that were in the pet trade that in the 90s. And because there's so much murky legality here, there's definitely could be some facts that I don't know about and may never know. So I'm just trying to connect the dots here with whatever information I can get, and there's other people that are trying to figure this out too. So we're doing the best we can here.
All right, let's get scientific for a minute. So Triosteris jacksoni is their scientific name, right? And there's three main groups. There's the Miramontes, which is the high level ones. Those are awesome. I've never owned them myself that I remember. They're really hard to get, and they're impossible to get in the United States. There's a Xantholophus, which we know and love, the yellow crested. And then there's a nominate form, which you like to say, the jacksoni, which seems to be, to my best determination, a grab bag. It's kind of like they're not all the same. They don't all look the same, like the Antholophus or the Miramontes. They may be more than one species. What are your thoughts on all that?
I don't think anybody has any doubt that the jacksoni is comprised of 5 different subspecies or species. I mean, Miramontanus may be a separate species when the dust settles. And jacksoni, I mean, the Machacos Hills Jackson's chameleon is completely, it looks different than the higher level ones, and that we don't see. But if you get the book Mountain Dragons by Jan Stapala, and if anybody wants that, dragonstrand.com, I have copies of it available. And that helps support Jan, who's been very good and very generous with his photographs and his knowledge. So it's a good thing. But you look in there and you see,
go get it if you don't have it. You have to get it. If you will love Jackson's, then you'll be wanting all these ones you can't get. But nonetheless, go ahead. I'm sorry, Bill.
Yeah, because they live on different areas around Mount Kenya. It's a huge mountain, and there's different ecological zones around Mount Kenya, and these are like isolated populations all over the place, and they're different. Now, to scientists, they don't look at color. So we look at the Machacos Hills Jackson's chameleon and we say, wow, the yellow and green and blue, that's much different than the little brown thing you get from Nairobi. But as scientists, they look more into the internal structures and all that kind of stuff. So we can't just look at all these pictures and say, okay, that's a different subspecies. But if you go to Mountain Dragons, and you can just flip through and you see so many different uh, locales, we'll call them at this time. There's the blue-eye Jackson's chameleon. Oh my goodness! And then there's a Jacksony at the top of Mount Kenya, which is actually at a higher elevation than the Miramontanus and is a smaller than the Miramontanus. So, and we've never seen that in captivity. I'm not sure how well it would do in captivity when it's coming from such high elevations. Would we be able to give it the conditions it needs to survive and thrive here? Don't know. So the taxonomy of the Jackson's chameleon is it's murky, but it's exciting. I hope people are working on it. But when that gets sorted out, we're going to have a very exciting. We're all going to have to learn new names. If anybody was around, let's see, it was a little while ago, and the Fisher's chameleon group, Fisheri, just broke up into Machii, Multituberculata, Fisheri, and it was just all these different species. And I think that's what's going to happen with the Jackson's group.
These scientists, they just need something to do, so they keep naming these things and changing the names and changing the groups and what have you. So,
all right. Let me say, if anybody's asking, well, why does it matter? I want to say let me tell you why it matters is because if you have Jacksoni, and you have all of these like seven groups that are under that one subspecies name, and really you get protection when it's a species level, not subspecies. But if they are all Jacksoni, then they are protected as Jacksoni. And if the Jacksoni are all over Nairobi and Chogoria and in these areas that are very highly populated with certain locales, then the other areas may not get the protection they need because that's Jacksoni, right? And we already have lots of them here, so there's already lots of Jacksoni. Why do we care? Let's go ahead and clear cut it. But if they are given a separate species name, because they are separate, they are not Xantholophus over on the other side of Mount Kenya. If they have a separate species name, then the authorities and the government organizations say, oh, okay, wait a minute. We may not want to give permits because that will totally wipe out this entire species. And so that's why it's very important that these scientists do go in and name all these different varieties if they truly are different.
And I think based on what I've seen and what they look like and even their size, their behavior, the ones we do get, they're different, and we do need to keep them. And if we lose the Jacksoni, we lose the Xantholophus, we lose the Miramontanus, I can never say that word right, it'd be a problem. The Machakas Hills are the ones we really consider the Jacksoni. They're incredible. But I've had a few of them where they wouldn't even look at each other. I'm fairly certain that they're not interested in mating with each other because they're maybe different subspecies, maybe different, what have you. So let's talk a little bit. Go ahead.
I mean, considering how easy it is to get them from Nairobi, it wouldn't surprise me that is included. They're all supposed to be farm raised, but okay.
If it got on the farm, it's raised, right? Okay. Abigail's saying hello in the background there. Sorry about that. She's enjoying our show here. So let's talk about the chameleons. The Jackson Xantholophus. The males have 3 horns. The females have horn nubs or nothing at all. The Jacksoni, the males have 3 nice big horns, and the females, we can't even tell them apart. The females sometimes have 3 horns, sometimes have 1 horn. What's up with all that?
Well, that is the maybe one of the chameleon world's biggest confusion points. Is because everybody learns how to tell the difference between male and female with the Xantholophus, which is the common yellow-crested Jackson's chameleon that we see so often. And but that is the only subspecies where the female doesn't have horns. And so this does lead to some confusion when you have your male Jackson's chameleon and then 2 years later, your cage is filled with babies. So on the Jackson's Chameleon community. That's a Facebook group. Many of you are here from there. We get this all the time. People saying, wait a minute, I thought I had a male. Is this really a male? Can somebody tell me? Do I have a male or a female? It's a thing. And having surprise babies is always every now and then. On a regular basis, we will have someone come in and say, oh, what do I do with all these babies? I didn't even know she was pregnant. So, we have a lot of fun with the females of the species.
It happens. It's fun. It's good times. I remember the first time I walked downstairs and saw a bunch of what I thought were bugs in the cage, and they were crawling all around. I know it was 20 years ago, but they were crawling all around, and I'm like, "What are those things? They look like little chameleons. Oh, they look like little chameleons. Oh my!" And so I, got myself some fruit flies and fed them away. But it's a neat experience. It's also very surprising, and it's always at the worst time. That
Yeah.
you're about to walk out the door like I am to go somewhere this weekend, and the chameleons drop. So I know that Bill sent me a couple of these Jacksoni females that were a little plump. So I'm worried. I keep looking downstairs, going, "It's going to happen. It's going to happen." Luckily, my daughter, who has taken care of chameleons and all kinds of reptiles for years, is going to be home, and I've got tons of fruit flies. So life is good. I just need to dump the fruit flies in there, and we'll be good for a couple days.
I
So,
got a special
um,
present for you, Sean.
it's a special present. It's a good thing though. You get one and you get 40 others. So that's the way it is. And I've got a bunch of baby cages all set to go. So when I get back, I can sort them out. But moms never really eat the babies for the chameleons as much as people like to say that. At least I've never seen it happen. So I think we'll be okay. But it is a fun surprise. So it's
I was running
enjoyable.
a special,
Yes,
40 for the price of two.
buy one get 40 free. And just don't matter. Just make sure you feed them. Okay. So let's talk about chameleons. Many of the people that are listening may not be chameleon people. What makes chameleons different than other reptiles? What are they like? Are they easy reptiles? Are they medium reptiles? Are they hard reptiles? What are they like?
The biggest difference is probably the level of awesomeness. And so it's just
I knew
way
that was
above.
coming. Why did I not see that coming? That softball went right in there. The level of awesomeness.
Oh, well,
I mean, they do shoot out their tongue and grab things flying through the air. So I don't know how many pets do that. You're not
yeah.
going to get your Labrador to come in and jab something in the air. Although my one dog, my Greyador, does seem to be able to jump in the air and grab food, but nonetheless, it's not the same.
Have you seen a chameleon snatch a flying fly out of the air?
Oh, absolutely. That
Yeah,
is
they
incredible.
get good.
I do flies. I'm actually culturing my own flies at this point. I never thought I'd be doing anything like that, but I'm culturing my own flies so that I have flies for them. Because if something's flying, they love it. Black soldier flies, they love. Those are a little slower and a little more deliberate. But regular flies, I like those house flies and those blue bottle flies, and those are awesome. That's incredible. It's a great thing to see.
Well, to answer your question, I do say chameleons are challenging. They definitely are unique, and so they're highly sought after as pets. They're incredibly cute, and unfortunately, because of that, many of them go to homes that are not ready. And the chameleons are just a challenge because you're trying to put a slice of a tree inside of a cage, and you've got this colorful, incredibly bizarre animal, and it looks cute, it looks approachable, it's got those big eyes going around and round, and so they don't look intimidating. They look like something you want to hug. And unfortunately, chameleons are not hugging animals. They're more like if you want to set up a very expensive terrarium and have your chameleon sitting in that terrarium and just sit around, and it doesn't want to interact with you. So here's the caveat. Someone is going to come up and say, oh, my veiled chameleon loves me and loves to come out. A small percentage of chameleons, chameleons have different ranges of being able to interact with human beings. And there is a small percentage of chameleons that actually, you put your hand in the cage, they'll walk out on your hand and just crawl around on you and say hello to the world. And unfortunately, if you go into owning a chameleon with that expectation, most of you will be disappointed, and it's a bad situation for you and the chameleon. But if I tell you, like 95% of the chameleons are not social, and you're ready for a chameleon that's not social and is nervous about you, it's offensive around you, and you're saying, okay, I'm not going to hold you, well, then 5% of you are going to be pleasantly surprised, but all of you will have a reasonable expectation about chameleons. And so this is one reason why we really harp on, don't expect your chameleon to want to crawl on you or be handled, because that's the situation for most chameleons. And we will be fighting that forever, I think, because of how visually appealing they are to people that just walk in and say hello. What's this? I came in for dog food, and here's the this cutest thing in the world. And someone on Facebook saying, you mean biting isn't social? Okay, I thought this was going to be a family show here. Let's not get into that. And so
let's move on over to the Bill Strand. Are you going to talk on the Kenyan Sands project?
Okay,
let's talk about the Kenyan
save me,
Sands
Sean, save me. Okay. Okay. Question about the Kenyan Sands project. Yeah, a few years ago. Well, it's been a little while. I worked with a very reputable importer to bring in Kenyan bloodlines. And what I wanted to raise awareness that let's bring in these original bloodlines, these larger and bloodlines. And so a number of people got together with me, and we brought over a pretty sizable group for the breeding. And I think it was a success. I wanted it to become a registry, so we all had our bloodline registered and stuff, but the community is not ready for that level of organization. But I think it was a success in the way that it really drove awareness of the difference between Kenyan and Hawaiian, and people were able to make a choice as to what they really wanted to be involved in. And of course, we were pushing, if you're gonna be breeding, use the stronger genetics with the Kenyan genetics. The Hawaiians, wonderful as pets, they have all the personality and all the charm, but we encouraged you to go use the Kenyan bloodlines. And no, don't mix the Kenyan and Hawaiian bloodlines, because then you're defeating the purpose. So it was a success in that way, and I'm happy with that. I'm happy with what came of it. So it was very useful, and I still have chameleons from that group. They came in excellently, very healthy. So.
Yes, all the ones I've gotten from Kenya and the ones I've gotten from your groups have been awesome. They've been big, good breeders, dropping tons of babies for me. So that's great. So, go ahead.
Well, we can go to this other comment down here saying they seem fairly happy and responsive to hand feeding. So how well chameleons, quotes, tame down. And this is exactly right. One level of interaction with your chameleon that most of the chameleons will eventually get to is where they will eat out of your hand as they're sitting in their safe cage. And so this is a reasonable expectation as to an interaction with your chameleon. And it's fair. I mean, I'll say Jackson's chameleons, especially females, female yellow-crested Jackson's chameleons, the Xantholophus, are just amazing with their personality. And I've had them tame down. I don't want to advertise them as tame because, okay, the poor chameleon suffers if they don't meet your expectation. But I have had more female Xantholophus that just immediately take to taking food from my hand. And then they'll even get so distracted by food, they'll crawl on my hand so I can take them to another more food. So I mean, I haven't had that happen with males, but hand feeding is definitely a reasonable expectation for most chameleons to warm up to.
Especially if you have something like a green banana roach or a silkworm or a hornworm. They love those things, and so that's candy to them. It's not candy; it's good for them. It's what they eat, but definitely good. So let's talk. If you really want to get into chameleons, you need to go to the Chameleon Academy. You need to join the chameleon enthusiasts, the Jackson Chameleon community, and learn, spend some time, listen, and do what you have you. But let's just, as if we were talking about any reptile, let's go through and talk about the basics to keeping a Jackson chameleon. What do you put it in? Obviously, not a cardboard box. What would you suggest?
So chameleons, the Jackson's chameleons are going to be looking for a okay. We're gonna select our cage based on the needs of the chameleon. The chameleon needs high humidity during the night and be able to bring that humidity down during the day to 50% or so. So 100%, 80 to 100% at night, down to 50% during the day. Temperature range, we're looking for an ambient temperature of the mid 70s with a basking in the low 80s, and then a nighttime drop down into the 50s. Ideal. I mean, low 60, you can get away with low 60s. And we can talk about, let's make sure we talk about the importance of the nighttime drop and the complications in recognizing the importance. But what you're looking for is a cage that will allow you to create those conditions. And so if you're a screen cage is perfect if you live in an area that can naturally handle Jackson's chameleons. If your area is matches those care conditions, a screen cage is what you want. I keep Jackson's chameleons outside, and obviously that means a screen cage, but they do very well in those conditions. So I don't have to have these solid sides to hold in the humidity because it's fine. But if I was in an area, say my house, which has air conditioning, so it sucks moisture out of the air, then I need to have solid sides on the cage so I get the humidity retention. It doesn't just dissipate immediately. Now, you need the airflow. You still need airflow. We can't use an aquarium. And so that's why you see these hybrid cages. They have these the screen at the screen vents at the bottom and then the screen top. And so you get that airflow, that chimney effect airflow. And so that's what you use in an area that that doesn't have the high humidity at night. And generally, if you're keeping your chameleon indoors, you're not going to have those high humidity nights because of central air or heating. You can have a fogger at night, and if you use a screen cage, you can't have a fogger, and you'll have this little column of fog that they will eventually sleep under. But I mean, I prefer hybrid cages indoors. Inside the cage, what's important is that you have, a formula that I have used that's been very successful and easy to replicate is the top 9 inches are clear, just has a bunch of branches so they can choose their basking area for heat, UVB, and then the very thick middle layer of foliage. And so I have lots of plants right there in the middle where that's big enough and with perching branches behind it to where they can get away from my prying eyes and the lights, the UVB and all that stays up in those 9 inches, and they can get away from it all in that middle layer. At the bottom of the cage, I like to keep it clear because I can look at the poop and I can gauge their health by the poop. This is important for a chameleon because a lot of times if you do your cage right, you're not going to be able to see your chameleon. It's hidden. And I mean, I don't see some of my chameleons I don't see for days, but I know how much they're eating and how they're healthy by what's at the bottom. Now,
so essentially, Bill, we've got these chameleons. We're feeding them crickets and bugs and things, and poop comes out. So we would just have these poop making machines that we don't see very often. Okay, that seems really appealing.
That's what we chameleon
We become
people are. We're poop
poop
watchers.
scientists. We're poop watchers. We make sure the poop's coming out. We make sure the crickets are going in. And every once in a while, we get this shot of this thing shooting its tongue out, grabbing something. Okay, excellent. But people are
Now,
going to love these things. Maybe
the
maybe we will take a few people out of these instead of the people who don't really want them. So, okay, go on.
if anybody is following me on YouTube or on Instagram, I'm having these themed weeks. And so every day you get a video that talks about one aspect of the week's theme. Going into next week, I'm going to be starting to talk about the environment and going into bioactive, at which point I'm going to specifically address using bioactive with chameleons. And it's a lot of fun. There's some advantages. There is the disadvantage that you no longer can gauge your chameleon's health by the poop. And so you just need to be so I will say there is an advantage to having a clear floor, at least when you start off, and so you can get a feel for your chameleon's health. And seeing their poop is the perfect way to do that. When you are comfortable with that, then it's a little easier to get those training wheels off and go into the bioactive, which is a lot of fun.
So we have a good question here. We have an individual who has a cage that doesn't get below 68.
What?
So what do you okay, yeah. So what do you think? How do you get your cage below 68? I can tell you how I get mine there, but
I have an air conditioner, and that is the only way. I've been all around my state, and chameleons live outdoors where I live. In Southern California, and we've had some feral populations here. They haven't exploded like they have in Hawaii, but my chameleons live all year round outdoors, and I help them with water, but otherwise they're fine. Now, see, the problem with 68 degrees is they do much better at lower nighttime temperatures. And so to answer your question, I'm going to start off with an explanation as to why it's important, so we understand the significance of trying to solve this problem, and then we'll talk about actually solving the problem. If they are outside, it's interesting how that is different. Chameleons can take higher temperatures outside than they can indoors. And that is because in outside, there's a whole lot more ebb and flow of conditions. And I won't be able to put a black and white finger on it and tell you the data. All I know is between what I've done outside versus inside, there's so fewer microclimates inside that we need to give more of an idealized situation inside than they are when they are outside. So when we say that they need this nighttime drop, what we're saying is within the indoor conditions, over the community of keepers that we can talk to and the experiences, we find that Jackson's chameleons will be healthier longer if they have that nighttime drop. The reason why that nighttime drop is important is because the colder it is, the deeper the chameleon sleeps. And so, yes, they'll sleep when it's warmer, but it's a light sleep. And, when you don't have good quality sleep, eventually you get cranky and eventually your immune system starts going off and you start getting sick. And that's the exact same thing that happens with a chameleon. So that's why it is important to give the nighttime drop. The next point is we don't know exactly where that cutoff is as to how cold is cold enough and how long does it need to be cold to be considered, okay, we're now healthy. We don't have those delineations. All we know is, okay, but when we get it all the way down to the low 60s or 50s, that produces a that produces a healthy chameleon. Would it be okay in the upper 60s? That's starting to get warmer than we'd like to get it, but I can't tell you that at what point that will be a problem. And maybe there's other conditions that will take over. So it's a very murky area in there. Now, if you're asking how to get below 68, and that's a common question with when people, Jackson's keepers, hear that they need to have a nighttime drop, and really the only way to do it is by central air conditioning. If you're going to have them indoors, central air conditioning. If you have them outdoors, a large cage, heavily planted with a soil bottom, and the soil bottom is shaded, and you will create, and by large cage I mean 3 to 4 feet wide, 6 to 7 feet tall, 3 to 4 feet deep. That's what I would do for outdoor cages. And if you heavily plant that, it's amazing how well they can do, even though the conditions are breaking everything on the care sheets. I had quadricornis in 100-degree weather outdoors. And for those who don't know, quadricornis is a high altitude chameleon that's even more sensitive than Jackson's chameleons to high heat. And some of my summer temperatures hit 100 degrees and above, and those quadricornises did great. But if you did that inside, in a cage inside, they'd be dead. So this is the differences between indoor and outdoor keeping. The reason why it worked is because they had a soil floor, it was heavily shaded, and I had misters going. And so they just went down close to the ground, and I put my hand down there, and it was downright a little bit chilly down there. So even though it was sweltering out here, I mean, I almost crawled into the cage with them. But that's the difference between indoors and outdoors keeping. And so I caution everyone, do not look at, like in Hawaii, do not go outside and say, hey, look at the temperature there. It's not 50 in the 50s. Therefore, those guys on the Jackson's Chameleon community don't know what they're talking about, because Jackson's chameleons live here. Yes, they do. And outdoors is completely different than indoors. What we talk about is for indoors keeping. And so actually, wow, I've pontificated beyond belief. Pull me back in, Sean.
All right, I was just letting you go, but so what do I do?
Oh, somebody's got another question.
Let me finish what I do real quick. I'll get my 2 seconds in. I do air conditioning, but I also live in Ohio, so it's 30, 20 degrees in the winter, and I open a door and I let the air in, and I let Mother Nature cool them off, and that gives me good airflow. So it's another way of doing it. It's the disadvantage, I can't let them outside when it's snowing because it's a little too cold for them. But go ahead. You were going to answer another question. What do they do?
What happens if it's 112 degrees outside? They die. There isn't a whole lot you can do at that level. And I know, because I actually lost my Miramontanus, my last Miramontanus, at a 113-degree heat wave that came, it was a snap heat wave that came while I was in Europe. And it just was horrible. And yeah, you lose them. Heat is the killer of chameleons. It's not cold. Don't worry about how cold it gets at night. Of course, you can't go freezing, because then the cells, you actually get damage at the cellular level. But down to 40s, no problem, as long as they can warm up during the day. But heat will kill.
Almost every reptile is like that, but yes, chameleons are very sensitive to heat. Many of them more sensitive to others. But okay, great. So we were talking about cages. We've got this cage that keeps in the humidity. We've got plants. We've got a clear top, a clear bottom, plants in the middle. How do we get them?
Clear top, you mean screen?
Screen, right?
No. Clear top, you mean the basket.
Area, right? Yeah. Screen on the top. And how do we get them water? What do we do? Put a water dish in there and let them soak it up? Or I know better, but my chameleons drink out of a water dish. That's a common theme.
What we found that we really like to use is a combination of a mister and a fogger. And the mister is great for these rainstorms that they give direct hydration through drinking. And the fogger is great for keeping them from dehydrating at night when they're doing all the breathing. I mean, every living thing breathes and you lose moisture. I mean, we already know that. We wake up and we got to take a glass of water because all of our moisture is now condensed on the windows. So that happens in lizards as well. And when we fog during the night, we decrease the amount of dehydration they get during the night. And so they don't wake up as dehydrated. They don't have to drink as much during the day. And so you can actually hydrate a chameleon by fogging at night and then letting them wake up to, running the misters right before the light comes on. And then you have a world covered in dew that the chameleon can then drink and get hydrated. Now, I always like to, and I recommend on all my care summaries, to have a test during the day. In the late afternoon, I run a dripper. You can run misters to see if they are thirsty. The problem with the misters is there's so much else that goes around with that you can't judge their behavior. If I run a dripper, I know if they go to drink, they are dehydrated, they need more water, I need to do something with my hydration. If they ignore it and their poop is moist, then I know things are good. If I run a mister during the day, that's an event like, oh my gosh, all this is going on, I'm being sprayed, I need to run away. And it takes a while before they realize they can't run away, and then they just hunker down and then they start drinking. That's a traumatic event. That's not necessary. So I don't like using a mister for that. But if I do decide to have a mister during the day, what I'll do is I'll turn off the main lights, and then I'll turn on the fogger, and then turn on the mister. And what this does is it gives the chameleon a signal that there's something, that the clouds are coming in. There's going to be a rain shower. I can't change the barometric pressure, but chameleons are smart enough that they will figure out that there is something happening, and they'll get used to. They'll figure out that means there's a rain shower coming, and that's one way you can hydrate in the late afternoon. I do it in the late afternoon, or sometimes I do it in the evening, and that becomes the good night ritual. And so they're hydrated going into the night, and that works. So that's the most used within our group. That's how we hydrate chameleons, and it works very well with Jacksons.
All right, we're kind of getting close to the hour here, Bill. So we're kind of have to get through a few more of these topics. So sunshine, sun produces heat, produces light, produces UVB. How do we do that for a chameleon? Do we care? Is it okay? Or do they need stuff?
We absolutely care. It's critical for chameleons, and unfortunately, with our technology, we have to break those up. And so we have one light for heat, one for UVB, and one for white light for vision. And I like to use these 4-bulb fixtures of T5 fixtures, fluorescent fixtures, where I have 3 6500K bulbs for white light and 1 UVB bulb. And then for basking, just to warm up in the morning, I have a low wattage bulb. And the important thing with the UVB and the heat is you make sure that the screen top is not at dangerous heat level, because chameleons will burn themselves. They don't seem to, they know they need heat, but they don't seem to understand the fact that there could be too much heat and that could burn them. It's like something inside of them says, okay, I need to warm up. I am going to spend this amount of time under the lamp until a timer goes off. Okay, I'm done. And if that lamp happens to be way too hot, they will actually let themselves get burned while they're waiting to warm up. And so they don't understand that this localized heat is damaging and could get infected and could kill them while they're heating up. And so we have to make sure that we have safe levels of heat coming into the cage. And it just follows logically that we would do the same with UVB, because they show that they know they need to go basking UVB, but they don't show that they know the difference between reasonable levels and too high of levels.
All right, so we've got a cage with sides that keep the humidity in. We've got a screen top to let the air out and in. We've got screens somewhere else to let some air movement go in. We've got some plants. We've got humidity from misters. We got foggers at night. We've got the sunlight from 3 different items, whether it's in one bulb or multiple bulbs. It's probably easier to do it in multiple bulbs so we can adjust each little component. What do we feed these guys? How do we feed them?
Oh, generally we feed them anything that moves and is small enough to fit in their mouth. Um, a lot of that is crickets, black soldier flies, any of the worms, super worms, and black soldier fly larvae. And yeah, I said that. Dubia roaches. They're not very picky as to what they eat, and so they're a lot of fun to feed. And the biggest thing is just make sure that it's small enough that it's not going to become too big. And we say the width between their eyes, and that just kind of gives you an idea of what will fit easily in their mouth. It's better to have 5 small things than one thing that is just massive and they have to try to chew to make it fit down their throat.
And what do we feed our feeders? We make it like the Lion King, the little cream-filled kinds, right?
Yes, you always gut load those feeders. When they come to you, they are usually just assume that they are empty shells, and you need to fill those empty shells with fruits, vegetables, grains. I do these premix cricket chows that just have everything in them, and you do that 24 to 48 hours before you feed it to your chameleon, and that's why you make it nutritious. And we can add on some supplementation to that to even make them more nutritious. And generally speaking, we got to be careful because Jackson's chameleons are sensitive to fat soluble vitamins. So, what has worked is to do calcium every feeding, and then once a month you can do a multivitamin. And I've been using Repashy Calcium Plus Low D because it has reasonable levels of vitamin A. And that gives you a lot of the minerals and vitamins, especially vitamin A. That's the thing we really need from this multivitamin. Once a month is fine. And you can
I've
get
been
her.
using Repticalcium and Reptivite once a month, but very similar stuff to the Repashy stuff. They're all good stuff, but that seems to work for my Jacksons as well. So
Yeah,
great.
I do like to give them bee pollen. So I will grind up bee pollen and mix it 50% calcium, 50% bee pollen, and I'll use that as my everyday feeding. I have used Arcadia Earth Pro. That is bee pollen in with calcium and then carotenoids. So that does the same thing. But the biggest problem is when you give them too many fat soluble vitamins and they get edema, and it's unhealthy. They're just more sensitive than a panther chameleon or a veiled chameleon, which is surprising because a veiled chameleon should be sensitive, but they're not. Veiled chameleons just break the mold.
And we'll hear more about that on Saturday, I guess, right? Or after we do our
That's
homework
right.
in time. All right. So chameleons, do we put 10 of them in a cage and hope they do well, or what do you think?
You do not put don't put chameleons together. One chameleon per cage. And I know I constantly have people asking me, well, how big does it have to be to have a pair of chameleons in, or 1.2? And the problem is, even when you have 2 females, you may not see the conflict between them, but there is an unspoken, they know it's going on, and there is a dominance thing going on. It's hard to get a cage big enough for chameleons because it's not that you need to have enough in there that they can get away from each other. They don't want to get away from each other. They want to prove their dominance. So the dominant one is going to find the submissive one and bully the submissive one, even females. So it's not about, okay, I'll give a cage and I'll have two equal basking branches, 2 equal waters, 2 equal foods. That's not it. It is a territorial thing, and they just have it in them that they have to prove their dominance. So, 1 chameleon per cage, that's the easiest way. And well, that's the way it has to be. If you have them together, one of them will eventually get sick and die, and it will be 6 months. And you will say, but they did so well for 6 months. It must be something else. No, it was stress, low-grade stress over 6 months, which compromised their immune system, which meant that they couldn't fight off an infection. And so, yes, they died of an infection that was caused by constant low-grade stress, which was caused by keeping them together.
And that's your concept of chameleon health points. You don't.
Yeah.
It's not one thing or another. It's a bunch of little things that add up to something big. And when you get that something big, and you're 900-pound chameleon who's eating terrible stuff and not exercising, and the heart attack comes, it's dead. As opposed to the chameleon who's doing very well and survives whatever happens to come their way. Guess that's a little bit of humanized, but still, we take good care of them, and they do better with we get those lessons. So now, I guess if you have something the size of Kenya or Hawaii, or I guess even Florida, you could keep your chameleons together. But until we get that big a house, I guess it's time to keep them apart. It'd be the easiest, and that way we can check and see whose poop. We can't tell them apart. You need to know which poop it is when you're putting in those.
Yeah, you'd like to think that, well, okay, if I have a greenhouse and they have like two big bushes, well, they can find their own bushes. And I think that will work a little bit. But like in Kenya, when one of them says, I want that bush now, they can do an exchange and find different places. But I don't know how big is big enough to allow them to do that, but it's certainly not in a room.
They're not group animals, and so even in Kenya, they're not nice to each other. They just happen to be so far apart that there's enough space. But the reality is, there's a pecking order in Kenya as well, and some of them die early because they just didn't do as well. But we just don't like to think about that as well, I think. So, all right, we're approaching our hour. Usually, we try to keep these to an hour so people stay, and we appreciate everyone being here. Any final questions for anyone in the group here? I see someone said they had learned their lesson about keeping chameleons together. That's the hard lesson to
Yeah.
learn. And it's
And the
hard.
thing is,
Some people don't even learn it, but
there's so many hard lessons that we learn. Jackson's chameleons, especially because they have such a subdued personality. So if a veiled chameleon feels threatened by you, there's no doubt that veiled chameleon is going to communicate that
they
they
are
don't
not
like you.
shy. Right. They
So
communicate with their teeth.
they are expressive. Jackson's chameleons are not expressive like that.
Not at all.
Or they're more subtle. I mean, once you've had them for a while, you can tell. Oh, okay, I can tell their subtle language, but they are so subtle that beginners aren't able to interpret the signs. And so there's a number. Oh, okay, my Jackson's chameleon is not running away from me, therefore he's comfortable with me. So we make those logical leaps, and that just produces a very difficult situation and dangerous to their health situation for the chameleon. So Jackson's chameleons are much more susceptible to that kind of stress. And unfortunately, the keeper has spent 3 months thinking that they have a special bond with this chameleon. And when they find out that no, that's not a special bond, your chameleon has been shutting down because of stress, it adds heartbreak on top of guilt, and it's very sad. So yeah, we got to be very good at educating people about Jackson's chameleon and being gentle with them. You got to be firm, but try to be gentle, because this person has this idea that they have a great relationship with their chameleon, and it's really hard to pop that bubble. And some people just ignore it. They just leave the group. They don't want to hear it, and yeah, their chameleon eventually gets sick and die. But yeah, it's a difficult situation to deal with.
One last plea: captive born versus wild caught. Captive born are so much better than wild caught. I mean, I've done it both, and I do the wild caught so I can keep the bloodlines going. I don't end up making my own little Hawaii here in Cleveland, but captive born are so much better. If you want a pet, get a captive born pet. There are tons of people out there breeding, and don't be cheap. Buy one from someone who's actually selling it for a reasonable price, who's making a few bucks because they care. They're feeding the parents well. They're doing what they need to do. I'm not telling you don't have to buy it from me or Bill. There's tons of people out there, but find someone who's really cares and is doing a good job with all their reptiles. But with your chameleon, you really need captive born. Bill, agree, disagree?
Yeah, and another thing where Jackson's chameleons have an added burden is that some of these import facilities are they're grabbing, harvesting them, whatever they're doing. They're getting these females in, and the females will drop babies. So officially, that's a captive born baby now, and they will sell it as a captive born baby. And so when you see these babies for $50, what that is that's a female who dropped their babies. They threw them all into a cage together, and now they're just going to dole them out. And we have seen so many babies sold that are much too young to go to new homes, especially to inexperienced keepers. And it's because they're just blowing them out. And that's what you're getting for a $50 baby. That person who is selling them for $50 has not set up individual cages, has not gone through a diet plan, is just keeping them alive long enough to hoist them off on somebody like you. So it's even worse for Jackson's chameleon. I mean, panther chameleons are the same way. Every chameleon is the same way. But for those chameleons, you have to invest, you have to incubate eggs and all of that. There's a lot more work in it. Jackson's chameleons, female comes in, within 24 hours, you can be gifted with 30 babies, up to 50 babies, and now you can sell 50 babies. And so don't go for the low price ones. Stay away from the low price ones because it's not what you think it is.
You get what you pay for, unfortunately, according to them, as my daughter laughs at us in the background there. But you get what you pay for. It's important. It's not that we're trying to tell people to make money. No one's making a ton of money off Jackson breeding.
Not up to Jackson.
I don't think we're making any money at all, to be honest.
You're losing money. Even selling, you sell the Jackson's chameleon for $150 to $200, and that's a reasonable. That's even on the low side if you're going with a breeder. That's what we have to sell them for. At least we think we do. 150 for babies, 200 for adults, but even that's losing money. And so that is the range. Be ready to spend that, and you will not only get a healthy chameleon, you will get support from the breeder. And if something does go wrong, well, you've got that breeder there that's going to really help you. I mean, I had one where something went wrong. I took the chameleon back and worked with the chameleon. So that's what you get when you deal with a breeder that actually cares.
All right. Well, we've cracked an hour. I appreciate everyone being here. I thank Bill, and I appreciate the time everyone spent with us. I think next week we'll probably be talking about iguanas. One of those crazy pets that very few people actually think they know what they're getting themselves into. They get this tiny little thing, and they end up having a 5-foot pet. And they're you need 3 times the size cage length and size, and you need a lot more stuff. So we're going to be talking about iguanas. We're going to bring on some people who kept them. I've kept them for 30-something years as well. So maybe if I have one that's feeling tame enough, I'll bring it on as well so they can see it. Okay. That's a pet you can hold. Sometimes they're not too very friendly in breeding season, but we've gotten through May, so breeding season's kind of over. So hopefully we'll have one that's good and nice. But we'll do that next week. Thanks everyone for joining us.
All right.
And we'll see you then.
Yeah, I look forward to this one because I don't know much about iguanas, so yeah, I'll be listening from here.
All right.
So, all right, everybody. Thank you for joining us.